Today on Across the Fence, it may be the most persecuted animal in Vermont history. We're going to learn about the timber rattlesnake. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Judy Simpson. Some people are surprised to learn that there are rattlesnakes in Vermont. In fact, the snakes, they were nearly wiped out in the 20th century by fear and by bounties. So today we're going to learn about Vermont rattlesnakes in the 21st century, and we've called on an expert from the State Fish and Wildlife Department. I want to welcome in Doug Blodgett, who's a veteran wildlife biologist. Doug led Vermont's Wild Turkey Project for 20 years. He's been involved in research projects involving a variety of wildlife, including bear, moose, deer, peregrine falcons, and a whole lot of others. Doug, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Will. Good to meet with you this morning.
I want to start from an historical perspective. It's a very interesting and somewhat, and maybe even tragic story. What can you tell us about Vermont's timber rattlesnake population and historical perspective?
Well, so this animal has been on Vermont's landscape for thousands of years. It is an original native Vermonter. Right after the glaciation receded, rattlesnakes moved up from the southern portion of the eastern U.S. and into the Champlain Valley, and then also over into the Connecticut Valley. At that time, before colonial settlement, depending on who you talk to, we feel like we had on order of maybe a dozen to perhaps as many as 18 dens statewide. And then after European settlement and quite an extensive period of real wanton persecution, as well as habitat loss and habitat fragmentation from roads and development, we're now have an endangered population. We're down to just 2 remaining viable dens. So,
and while we don't identify those publicly, those dens, generally speaking, are in Rutland County.
Right, western Rutland County, yep, and that's what we'll say about that.
Our director, Adam Wright, was putting up an historical photograph that you provided with us, and this really does show, I gather, we put bounties on.
Yeah, we had a bounty until 1971, but this photo is more of a maybe late 19th century, early 20th century. But again, this shows the influence of the sort of the European culture, which was they were going to come in and get rid of this marauding scourge of a predator, and with sticks and dogs and guns, and they did a pretty darn good job of wiping out a whole lot of rattlesnake populations, along with a bunch of other predators like the mountain lion, and there was quite a. They did a pretty good job of that. It was sort of the European influence.
Let me just add, one of the unique perspectives that you can add is not only are you knowledgeable of the species, you know the history. There's some media involvement here. Why is this animal so persecuted? Why is it so beat on?
It certainly is, and it's primarily out of fear. I can't think of an animal that's really held in greater contempt than this one. It's highly controversial, and it's really result of fear. And in my view, it's always it's a media culture that always sensationalizes this animal in the worst possible way, with lots of fangs and lots of, anytime it's portrayed, it's very aggressive. And I've had about 18 years of experience in the field with these animals, and my experience has been totally different, quite the opposite.
And you and I both have a lifetime of growing up and living in Vermont. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't recall that I've ever heard a story that a Vermonter died because of the
only time we can find any evidence of a legitimate bite like that was probably the last time about 1850.
Yeah. So let's bring us up to speed today. Is this timber rattlesnake still on the state's endangered species list?
It still is, unfortunately. Yeah. So we feel like we're down to a very small, struggling population. maybe as many as a few hundred statewide is what remains.
How large an area do these animals need, Doug?
Well, this population is probably sustained on around 5,000 acres, and ideally that 5,000 acres would be largely free of any kind of human influence like roads or housing. In fact, these are in some ways overlapped with a sort of a matrix of very rural housing. But ideally, they can be sustained on about that level for a population.
Is the biggest danger to the rattlesnake, is it us? And a combination of not only our interactions, but our roads, our houses.
Well, it's that combination of wanton persecution, which we are trying to make some influence and get some headway on, but also potentially, essentially habitat loss, road fragmentation that cuts these habitats into smaller and smaller units. Okay. There's actual, den destruction, perhaps like during the creation of Interstate 91 way back in the 60s or 70s. There was some evidence that perhaps some of these, a few of the dens were inadvertently, destroyed.
One of the other pictures, and you brought along a number of things today that I found interesting. You share a picture of a snake's hunting posture, and as we just take a quick look, you describe a little bit, but what is the main diet?
The diet is almost exclusively rodents, so mostly mice, an occasional chipmunk perhaps, and maybe even a small squirrel. But this is the classic ambush posture here. So they don't crawl around and look for prey. That's very energy inefficient. What they do is they're sit and wait ambush hunters. So they will sit in that posture for about as long as 3 or 4 or 5 days, simply waiting for a little mouse or chipmunk to jump along that log. If that animal is not successful in that period, it will move to another little spot and set up this ambush posture.
Okay. So we're seeing that picture. Now Adam can take us inside. You shared a skeletal picture. And again, I'm just a little curious. We don't usually get to see this part of it. Tell us a little bit about the makeup.
Yeah, so in this photo is an X-ray, obviously, and you can see we have installed in this animal a radio transmitter, which we'll probably talk about a little later, surgically installed. But you can see the skeleton, and I do want to point out there's lots and lots of sets of ribs on that animal.
It looks literally like hundreds? But
hundreds of sets of ribs. And each of those individual ribs acts like a tuning fork, and they're quite well in contact with the ground, so the animals pick up a lot of vibration up through those tuning forks. It's sent into the spine and then up to the brain. So there's a lot of communication, particularly prey that are hopping along the ground and are picked up by the snakes in that way.
Not to prolong it, but just going back to snakes and roads, if that's the case, you would think that they would pick up the vibration and they would avoid the road.
Well, you would think so, but there is an attraction to the road, particularly after a long, warm day, and the asphalt has absorbed a lot of radiant heat, so they seek that out. Yeah. Unfortunately, when they do feel vibration like that, rattlesnakes really they just simply freeze. Rather than escape, like some other animals will do, they freeze, and that's what gets them in trouble on roads.
How long does a rattlesnake live, Doug?
The adult's about on order of 20 to maybe 25 years. Yeah.
That's a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah.
Reproduction-wise, does it take somebody time to be mature? They're laying eggs all the time?
Recognize that this Vermont ain't Texas, and so we have a southern species at the very northern tip of its range. So life is very hard for this southern species up here in Vermont's harsh climate. So they're only on the surface out of their winter den about 4 or 4.5 months out of the year, and they have to pack a lot of living into that 4 months, like reproduction, like feeding, shedding. There's lots of different life cycle requirements that need to be squished into that 4.5 months. So hence they grow slowly, and they don't grow as large as in some of the more southern climates.
I want to leave reproduction and just jump ahead a little bit. On my notes here, What's some of the research that is involved, that you're directly involved with rattlesnakes in Vermont?
So we've been doing some pretty intensive studies here since about my involvement in about 2010 or 2011. And you can see on the photo there that this is a surgical procedure that we actually bring selected individuals into the operating theater and insert these radio transmitters. And this is a shot, which was really lots of fun, actually, is once you have these animals transmitted, then the job is following them around and learning about very specific habitats that they
Now, one of the things that you're looking for, and I think this is in this picture, is part of your research is a fungal piece.
Correct. So this fungus has just appeared, and this animal here, this picture, shows a massive systemic infection, fungal infection. The animal died just shortly after this photo was taken. This is a very new development, and that fungus is fairly novel to us, fairly new, and it's not always fatal, but it is a very lethal fungus, and that has created another additional challenge to a tough life for animals here in the north.
Now, you and a colleague have put some of that field research related to snake fungal disease on camera, and we're going to take a moment to take a look at that.
We've got a nice big adult rattlesnake in here that we're going to try to capture and check it out for snake fungal disease. Got it?
Go.
Okay, nice and quiet. It's the way we like it. We're going to tube this snake, and so we can get a good hard look at it. We'll check it for fungal disease, and then we'll pit tag it, permanently mark it, and we'll release it right back where we found it. This is a nice robust snake. Not sure yet if it's a male or female. Could be a female. Has a broken rattle on it, which is quite typical. So the tricky part is getting them in the tube. Once they're in the tube, you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's no big deal. This animal out for evidence of snake fungal disease, which appear as lesions on the face and neck usually. Brown lesions on the ventral scales here. These ventral scales look all quite clean. This is a clean snake, which is a good sign. We like that.
21. Push it. Count it twice.
Okay, female. So we got a female here. So we know this animal's missing at least 10 rattles. Every time the animal sheds, it lays down a rattle segment, which is one of these rattles. Well, it's too late for this animal to be pregnant, and I know it's not, I don't believe it's had a litter this year. This is a permanent marker. It permanently identifies this animal.
Obviously a fascinating video. We do need to point out it would be illegal for someone like me to do that. Right. You're a highly trained professional. It's dangerous. It's illegal. Don't do it.
Yeah, leave the handling to the trained professionals. Yeah.
Very quickly, because we have about a minute left. I saw in some of the pictures, I'm seeing one color. In that video, I saw a different color. I thought the rattlesnakes were all the same color.
No, we have two color phases. This is a yellow, a really nice yellow phase. And we also have a black face. It's really a genetic difference, like blonde hair, brown hair kind of thing. It does seem like we have a high, as you go further north in the continental U.S., you seem to pick up more black animals, probably because of solar,
Doug, just sorry, about 30 seconds left. If someone were to come in contact with a snake, what should they do?
Okay, well, then what you should do is simply just respect some distance. And that's really all you need to worry about. Just back off 6 feet, 8 feet. The animals are not going to, as portrayed, commonly jump off the ground and go for the jugular. Just a little bit of distance, a little bit of respect, you have nothing to fear.
Doug, I need to stop us there as we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks a bunch.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.